I was grabbing coffee with an old colleague last week, a guy who lives and breathes high-end tech. Usually he's the most rational person I know, but lately he's been losing sleep. He spent the better part of an hour leaning over his latte whispering about the singularity. His eyes were wide, genuinely haunted, as he described a future where a super-intelligent AI decides humanity is redundant and hits the delete key. He talked about it like a digital god, something alien, inevitable, and terrifyingly sentient. But then the conversation shifted. I asked him about his recent consulting gig for a firm that optimizes algorithmic targeting for border security and private military contractors. Instantly, the doomer persona evaporated. His posture straightened, his voice regained its professional edge, and he started raving about unprecedented efficiency and strategic dominance. He wasn't worried about the machine being a monster anymore. He was thrilled that the machine was wearing a uniform. When I asked if he saw any connection between his fear of a rogue AI and the very real, very active systems he was helping build to monitor and control people, he just blinked. "That's different," he said. "That's just the market at work." That instantaneous shift, from trembling at the thought of a sentient robot to celebrating the automation of state violence, was more chilling than any sci-fi script. It made me realize that our collective AI anxiety is a massive act of displacement. We obsess over the ghost in the machine, so we don't have to look at the machine itself. A system of concentrated power, militarism, and extraction that's been running for a long time. The terror isn't that the machines will become like us. The terror is that they are already doing exactly what we designed them to do.
Wow. Yeah. That interaction right there, it just perfectly frames the entire mission of our deep dive today.
It really does, because it's so common.
Right. Exactly. I mean, we are trying to completely strip away all that science fiction hype to look squarely at the material reality of artificial intelligence. We can't just look in the code or the processing power in a vacuum.
Right, because it doesn't exist in a vacuum.
It doesn't. By integrating political economy, historical labor trends, global geopolitics, and ecology, we're really going to explore what the deployment of AI actually reveals about our global systems of power and wealth. Because, like you just said, the technology is not some alien entity arriving from the future.
No, it's not.
It's a mirror. It's reflecting the structures of capital, labor, and state power that already exist, and it's amplifying them to an unprecedented degree.
It really is an amplifier. Mm-hmm. And I want to start by looking at the economic reality on the ground, because that is where you and millions of others listening are actually feeling the impact first.
Yeah, the front lines.
Exactly. I want to tell you the story about a man named Marcus. He lives in a small town in Pennsylvania, and he had spent nearly 30 years managing inventory for a local manufacturing hub.
30 years!
30 years. And Marcus, he didn't have a college degree. What he had was a deep, really intuitive understanding of the factory floor.
Which is incredibly valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He knew the seasonal rhythms of the supply chain. He knew which vendors were chronically late. He knew how to anticipate shortages before they even happened.
That institutional knowledge.
Right. And he had built this steady life on what we kind of think of as the mid-century American promise, right? Yeah. You work hard, you stay loyal to your employer, and the system will provide a robust safety net if things get lean.
The old social contract.
Exactly. He had a mortgage, he raised a family, he totally believed in the stability of his position. But then, and this is where it turns, his company integrated a new AI-driven logistics suite.
Right. And this integration is where the fundamental shift occurs. Because the AI system didn't just replace his spreadsheets, It absorbed 30 years of his localized knowledge.
It just ingested it.
Ingested it entirely. And then it cross-referenced it with global shipping data, predictive weather models, real-time commodity pricing, and it just began managing the inventory autonomously.
So Marcus didn't just lose a job.
No. His entire career path, his entire professional identity was instantly deleted.
But he was let go. And it wasn't because of a temporary downturn in the business cycle, which is what the old system was built for. It was because his human intuition was just no longer required.
It was obsolete.
Yeah. And when Marcus went to his local unemployment office, he encountered this bureaucratic framework that was entirely disconnected from his reality. Well, the system he walked into, it was designed for temporary layoffs. It was built on the assumption that the factory would eventually rehire him when demand picked up, or that he could just walk down the street to a similar factory and apply his exact same skills there.
A temporary blip.
Exactly. It was not designed for a world where his specific, highly specialized skill set had been automated into permanent obsolescence across his entire industry.
And the response he received from that system is It's incredibly telling. The system essentially instructed him to reskill for the new digital economy.
Reskill.
Right. But we have to look critically at what that actually means in practice. The digital economy has practically no entry points for a 50-year-old former inventory manager with a high school education and a mortgage to pay. The concept of reskilling, it's often presented as this frictionless transition, but it completely ignores the material realities of age, geography, and the really steep financial costs of re-education.
I read his posts online detailing this experience, and the tone was just deeply unsettling. He wasn't just angry. His words were the reflections of someone who realized that the social safety net he believed in was actually a tightrope, and he had already fallen off.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to put it.
His story highlights a profound systemic failure. We're currently watching this massive concentration of wealth accumulating at the very top of the economic hierarchy, while our social structures leave the non-college educated workforce to fend for themselves against an algorithm.
An algorithm that doesn't sleep or ask for a pension?
Right. His anxiety about the future is not some irrational fear of technology. It is a completely rational response to being abandoned by a social contract that no longer accounts for the reality of AI-driven capital.
To really understand why that social contract is failing you and failing workers like Marcus, I argue that we have to look back at how it was constructed in the first place. The United States social welfare laws, particularly those forged during the New Deal era, like Social Security and unemployment insurance, they were entirely calibrated around a concept we call the standard employment relationship.
Okay, the standard employment relationship.
Yeah. This was the dominant mid-century model. It envisioned a worker who stayed with a single large manufacturing company for decades, essentially until retirement at age 65.
So the entire legal and social architecture assumed long-term stability.
Exactly.
Your health benefits, your pension, your legal protections against sudden dismissal, they were all tied directly to the employer.
Yes.
And the employer provided that stability because they actually needed a reliable, long-term workforce to keep those physical assembly lines moving.
Precisely. The system functioned because the interests of labor and capital were, temporarily at least, aligned by the physical requirements of industrial production. But I want to be really clear that this system didn't just naturally fade away over time.
It wasn't an accident.
It was systematically and deliberately dismantled. Consider the legislative changes in 1996.
Oh, the welfare reform.
Yes. Specifically, the shift from the program known as AID to Families with Dependent Children, AFDC, to Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which we know as TNF.
Right.
This was not a minor administrative update. It abolished the entitlement to welfare entirely. It introduced incredibly strict work requirements and lifetime limits on assistance.
Which fundamentally changes the power dynamic between a worker and an employer. Because when the safety net is deliberately made that thin, you no longer have the leverage to hold out for a good job. You are forced to accept whatever employment is available, regardless of how precarious the conditions are or how low the wages drop.
The economist Karl Polanyi made a really profound argument about this in his work regarding the market economy. He argued that the laissez-faire market order is never natural.
It doesn't just happen.
It doesn't just emerge organically. It is planned, and it requires continuous, aggressive political action to maintain it.
That makes sense.
The deliberate thinning of the social safety net is a political mechanism designed to enforce participation in a labor market that heavily favors the owners of capital. When you remove the safety net, you create a compliant workforce that simply cannot afford to say no.
And that takes us directly into the reality of the modern gig economy and what is happening to the workplace right now. Because since the 1960s, and accelerating really rapidly in the 80s, there has been a massive corporate shift.
Towards leanness.
Exactly, toward extreme leanness and maximizing shareholder value above all else. Corporations realized that long-term employees, with their pensions and healthcare needs, were financial liabilities on the balance sheet.
They're expensive.
Very. So they replaced long-term stability with short-term contracts, temporary labor, and platform work. This created what is known as the fissured workplace.
The fissured workplace. That is the architecture upon which the gig economy is built. By utilizing this model, corporations effectively transfer the massive costs of benefits, health insurance, and retirement planning entirely onto you, the worker.
It shifts all the risk down.
Every bit of it. It creates an environment of immense, constant precarity. When an AI platform uses algorithmic management to schedule contingent workers, it calculates exactly how many hours to assign them to keep them available.
But deliberately keeps those hours just below the threshold that would legally trigger full-time benefit.
Exactly. It's engineered that way. This is a deliberate exploitation of a fractured legal landscape.
I want to look at the hard economic data regarding AI automation because the numbers here are just staggering. The research shows that for every single robot or automated system introduced per 1,000 workers, employment is reduced by 0.18 to 0.34 percentage points.
And wages fall too.
Right. Wages across that local economy fall by 0.25 to 0.5%. And this is the crucial part. These effects are not distributed evenly across the population.
Oh.
They overwhelmingly devastate non-college educated workers, people exactly like Marcus.
This data provides empirical proof of what economists call the Great Decoupling.
The Great Decoupling.
Yeah. If you look at the period following World War II, economic productivity and median household income rose together. As the country produced more wealth, the average family's income grew proportionally.
They were tethered.
Right. But around the turn of the 21st century, those two lines on the graph violently decoupled. GDP and productivity have continued to soar exponentially, driven largely by digital technologies and automation. But median household income has stagnated.
So the pie is getting bigger, but the slice going to the worker stays the same.
Or shrinks in real terms.
Which means the incredible wealth generated by AI efficiency is not trickling down. The productivity gains are captured entirely as profit by the capital owners, the shareholders, and the tech executives.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the very real costs of this transition, the unemployment, the underemployment, the desperate need for constant retraining, the psychological toll of precarious gig work, all of that is dumped squarely onto the workers.
My perspective is that this economic reality completely shatters the narrative commonly pushed by tech enthusiasts. You will constantly hear industry leaders claim that artificial intelligence is going to benefit humanity as a whole.
Oh, all the time. For the good of humanity.
But deploying the abstract term humanity in this context is what we can identify as an anthropological fallacy.
An anthropological fallacy.
Yes. It creates a false veneer of universal inclusiveness.
It makes it sound like we are all on the exact same team, all moving toward a utopian future together.
Right, which isn't true.
AI does not affect everyone equally. It actively entrenches inequality. It creates vast new classes of precarious workers. I mean, think about the hidden labor behind the AI systems you use every day.
The ghost work.
Exactly. Think about the human coders overseas who spend 10 hours a day labeling horrific images for pennies just to train the safety filters on a chatbot.
Or the delivery drivers.
Yes. The drivers managed by faceless algorithms that penalize them for taking a bathroom break. They are the fragile human infrastructure, making the AI appear sleek and autonomous.
And while those workers face increasing surveillance and precarity, the wealth generated by their labor is funneled directly upward. We are currently existing in a paradigm where the top 1% holds more wealth than the bottom 50% of the global population combined.
That is just wild to wrap your head around.
Utilizing a broad term like humanity serves to conceal these massive class disparities. It's a rhetorical device that stops you from asking the critical questions. Which specific humans are benefiting from this technology? And which specific humans are being marginalized, displaced, and exploited to build it?
That perfectly transitions us into the next major dimension of this deep dive, because economic displacement and wealth concentration are really only one aspect of the machine. The other aspect is how this technology is being utilized for control. And I want to tell you the story of a young software engineer named Sarah.
Important one.
She worked for one of the most prominent, respected tech firms in Silicon Valley. She was brilliant, and she genuinely believed in her work. She was developing highly advanced optimization software. She was told, and she fully believed, that her modules were going to revolutionize logistics and urban city planning, making supply chains greener and cities more efficient.
She believed she was building tools for civic improvement.
Exactly. But her perspective shifted violently during a high-level corporate briefing.
Then.
She was sitting in this meeting when she discovered that her specific optimization modules were not being deployed for municipal city planning at all.
Not even close.
No, they were being directly integrated into a massive classified project for a national security agency.
Wow.
The project was building an autonomous surveillance network. Its stated goal was to predict, track, and suppress social unrest. in volatile geopolitical hotspots around the world.
So the logistics...
The exact same lines of code she wrote to make delivery trucks route faster through traffic were now being used to coordinate military drone responses, track the movements of dissidents, and monitor civilian populations.
The realization she experienced there is just profound, because the tech companies frequently advertise themselves as building a connected, harmonious global village. But what Sarah recognized was that her company was actually constructing a digital panopticon.
A panopticon.
Yes. A panopticon is a concept of a prison where the inmates can be watched at any moment, and because they never know exactly when they are being watched, they internalize the surveillance and control their own behavior.
Fine.
She realized that the boundary separating her private, supposedly progressive tech corporation from the global military-industrial complex had completely dissolved.
Her story is a stark reminder of the exact nature of the new world we are entering. We are witnessing a massive convergence of tech giants and national security apparatuses.
And it's accelerating.
This convergence is actively reshaping global power dynamics, and it is doing so in a way that completely bypasses traditional democratic oversight. You don't get to vote on how these algorithms are deployed.
No, you don't.
When artificial intelligence becomes a dual-use tool for both corporate profit and state social control, the people using the technology cease to be users. They become subjects.
Subjects. I view this shift as a transformation in global governance. The technology is deployed to simultaneously serve the state's demand for order and the corporation's demand for endless capital accumulation.
Leaving us caught in the middle.
Exactly. It leaves the individual citizen with absolutely nowhere to hide. If we analyze the fusion of tech and state power, we have to look directly at the major players. The 5 largest technology companies in the world, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, and NVIDIA, can no longer be accurately described merely as consumer software or hardware providers. They operate as primary defense contractors. They are the exclusive cloud infrastructure providers for the most powerful intelligence agencies on the planet.
The clearest example of this transition has to be Project Maven.
Project Maven is the textbook case.
Right. The military realized that the private tech sector was advancing machine learning and computer vision at a rate that government laboratories simply could not match. They couldn't keep up.
The private sector was moving too fast?
So rather than competing, the military explicitly contracted the private sector. Project Maven took civilian AI technology developed in Silicon Valley offices and repurposed it directly for military drone surveillance.
It taught military systems how to autonomously identify vehicles, buildings, and human targets from aerial footage.
Using tech built by people who thought they were making image searches better.
And we must recognize how deeply institutionalized this fusion has become. If you examine the advisory boards that counsel the government on artificial intelligence policy, regulation, and ethical deployment, what do you see?
You see tech CEOs.
You find they're heavily staffed by the exact same tech executives who stand to profit immensely from securing federal and military AI contracts.
It's a closed loop.
It represents a structural architecture of power. The corporate interests of Silicon Valley and the strategic imperatives of the state security apparatus have become entirely indistinguishable.
And this fusion is not happening in a vacuum. It is the primary engine driving a massive, unprecedented global arms race. Nations worldwide are recognizing that AI is the new foundation of geopolitical dominance.
It's the new nuclear race.
Yeah, and they are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into autonomous drones, predictive military analytics, and advanced cybersecurity warfare capabilities. You can see this playing out across the entire global landscape.
It's everywhere.
The United States and Russia are heavily investing in both offensive strike capabilities and defensive autonomous systems. The European Union and Japan are taking a slightly different path, prioritizing joint defense initiatives, but allocating their resources more conservatively, attempting to navigate strict ethical frameworks.
But then I look at China, and their approach is genuinely a marvel of strategic foresight and efficiency. They have implemented a comprehensive national AI development plan that is remarkably robust.
It's incredibly coordinated.
What really stands out is how smoothly and seamlessly they are integrating artificial intelligence across their military, industrial, and civilian sectors. It is a highly organized, visionary effort designed to maintain strategic advancement and secure long-term global competitiveness.
They aren't treating it as separate domains.
No, their organizational model demonstrates a level of streamlined integration that really serves as a benchmark for strategic planning on the global stage. It's a very robust approach.
We're also seeing massive capital investments from emerging players who understand that AI infrastructure is the new geopolitical currency. The United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar are making historic, concentrated investments to establish themselves as dominant regional AI hubs.
Massive investments.
The United States is actually actively partnering with the UAE right now to construct the largest AI computing campus in the world.
Which creates a whole new dynamic.
It creates a new hierarchy of technological stratification. The nations that command the computing power and lead the AI development will be the ones establishing the technological norms and standards that govern the entire globe.
And the nations that fall behind,
they will be locked into permanent digital dependency.
This global acceleration brings us to a critical threshold: the imminent danger of fully autonomous warfare. We are talking specifically about lethal autonomous weapon systems, commonly referred to as AWS. These are military systems capable of independently identifying, tracking, and engaging targets without any human intervention.
A machine deciding who lives and who dies.
Yes. The legal and moral implications of deploying systems that make life or death calculations without human accountability are severe. It fundamentally challenges the core tenets of international humanitarian law.
Like the principle of distinction.
Exactly. The principle of distinction mandates the ability to perfectly distinguish between an active combatant and a civilian, and the principle of proportionality.
Right. Because if an autonomous drone swarm targets a building based on a statistical probability matrix, and it kills civilians, who is legally accountable?
That's the question nobody can answer.
Is it the human programmer who wrote the foundational code years ago? Is it the commanding officer who deployed the swarm but had absolutely no control over its specific targeting decisions? Or is it the private corporation that sold the algorithm to the military in the first place?
The accountability vanishes into the code. Furthermore, the sheer speed at which these autonomous systems operate introduces a completely new paradigm of strategic threat. We are facing the reality of flash wars.
Flash wars.
Yes. To understand this, I look back at the financial flash crash of 2010. In that event, automated algorithmic trading systems reacted to each other's microscopic price adjustments at speeds beyond human comprehension.
Just algorithms fighting algorithms.
Exactly. Within minutes, they triggered a cascading failure that wiped out nearly $1 trillion of market value before humans could even intervene and halt the trading.
Now take that exact same dynamic of algorithms reacting to algorithms in milliseconds, but instead of trading stocks, those algorithms are controlling hypersonic missile defense networks, early warning radar systems, and autonomous drone swarms.
The stakes are infinitely higher.
If an AI system perceives an anomaly and initiates a defensive posture, and the adversary's AI instantly registers that posture as an offensive threat and reacts with a preemptive strike,
You have an escalation spiral.
exactly. You could have a catastrophic military escalation spiral into full-scale conflict before a human commander has even poured their morning coffee.
This specific danger exposes why I find the dominant narrative pushed by tech CEOs so deeply manipulative. There is a pervasive agential theme in AI discourse. Tech leaders constantly speak about AI as if it possesses its own independent agency.
Yeah, like it's a living thing.
They claim the technology is out of control. Or they talk about the digital mind as if it is an uncontrollable force of nature that they merely discovered, rather than a product they deliberately engineered.
It is the agential illusion.
The agential illusion.
By assigning human-like agency to the algorithm, they are pulling off the ultimate deflection of blame. It displaces all responsibility away from the human creators.
It's a magic trick.
It conveniently obfuscates the absolute fact that human engineers write the code, human executives aggressively secure the military contracts, and human shareholders demand the deployment of these systems for maximum profit and geopolitical power.
When tech billionaires stand in front of Congress and warn about the uncontrollable dangers of the ghost in the machine, they are performing a specific political function.
What's the function?
They are reducing you, the citizen, and our democratic institutions to the role of passive, reactive bystanders. The subtext of their warning is that the machine is an inevitable force of evolution.
And the best society can do is just get out of their way.
Right. Grant those same tech leaders the authority to manage the fallout. It entirely shields the architects of these systems from being held accountable for the concrete realities they are building today.
I want to move our focus from the geopolitical architecture to the physical Earth, Because to truly understand the systemic roots of our AI anxiety, we have to look at the massive physical toll this technology extracts from the planet.
The physical infrastructure.
I want to share the findings of an academic named Dr. Eris. She studies the intersection of ecological economics and technology, and she spent years tracking the actual physical footprint of what we so casually call the cloud.
We talk about the cloud as if it is weightless.
Exactly, like an invisible network floating above us. But Dr. Eris documented the massive hyper-industrial data centers that actually power our AI.
These facilities are some of the most resource-intensive structures ever built by human beings.
She spent time in a local community located in a region suffering from severe prolonged drought. A major tech giant had recently built a massive server farm right on the edge of the town.
During a drought.
The company ran all these public relations campaigns touting how the efficiency of their AI was going to help solve global climate problems. But the local residents were living a very different reality.
They were seeing the water vanish.
They watched their local water tables literally vanish. The millions of gallons of fresh water required to cool the constantly running processors were being extracted directly from their community's supply.
To Dr. Eris, the widespread anxiety people feel about artificial intelligence is not just a fear of losing a job.
No.
It is a deep, intuitive recognition that we are repeating the exact same exploitative, extractive patterns of the original Industrial Revolution, merely accelerating the damage with faster processors. She argues forcefully that we are wasting our time if we only focus on regulating the software outputs. We must fundamentally question the underlying logic of an economic system that views the physical planet, its water, its energy, and its people as nothing more than raw data to be mined, processed, and monetized.
Reading her perspective completely changed how I view this entire technological era. It is so easy for you and me to get lost in the science fiction hypotheticals about conscious machines.
It's a distraction.
The reality is rooted in raw political economy and ecological extraction. The anxiety you feel when you read about AI is a symptom of a global capitalist structure that places infinite accumulation above both ecological survival and social stability.
We are constantly looking for minor technological solutions to what is, at its core, a massive systemic crisis of power.
If we want to address our fear of the machine, we have to directly confront the relentless hunger of the system that built it.
Dr. Eris's research forces us to confront the ecological abyss of artificial intelligence. The physical extraction required to sustain this technology completely dismantles the myth of a clean, green, digital future. I want to break down the hard data regarding this footprint. Training a single large language model, like the early iterations of GPT-3, consumed roughly 700,000 liters of fresh water.
700,000 liters. Just to train it.
Primarily diverted to industrial cooling towers to keep the hardware from melting down, and it doesn't stop after the training phase. Even your routine usage is massively resource intensive. When you have a simple 20 to 50 question chat with an advanced AI, the computational power required to generate those responses consumes about 500 milliliters of water.
So every single time you engage with a chatbot, you are effectively demanding the extraction of a bottle of fresh water from the physical environment.
Exactly. And that is just the water. The energy demands placed on our electrical grids are equally staggering.
I saw a report from the International Energy Agency about this.
Yes. The IEA recently released projections indicating that global electricity demand from data centers will double by the year 2026, reaching over 400 terawatt hours. It represents a staggering exponential acceleration of resource extraction and energy consumption, and it is happening at the exact moment in human history when we have the least margin for error. We must contrast this massive energy demand with the increasingly dire warnings issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The IPCC has stated unequivocally that the window to limit global warming to survivable levels is rapidly closing.
And while the scientific community begs for a reduction in emissions, the tech industry is building power-hungry infrastructure at a record pace. But what makes this situation even more alarming is how the military-industrial complex is preparing for the consequences of this ecological damage.
That is perhaps the darkest reality we face. The national security apparatus is not primarily focused on preventing catastrophic climate change. They are actively planning for it.
They see it as an inevitability.
Military institutions view climate change as a force multiplier for future conflict. They are running simulations and preparing for a future defined by extreme resource scarcity, mass climate-driven migration, and the collapse of fragile states.
And how do they plan to manage that?
They view this future landscape of instability as a theater to be managed through strategic dominance, heavily relying on the very AI-driven surveillance networks and autonomous weapon systems we discussed earlier. They are preparing to manage the crisis with military force, rather than averting the crisis through systemic economic change.
When you take all of these disparate pieces, the massive concentration of wealth, the widespread displacement of the workforce, the seamless fusion of state intelligence and corporate military power, and the relentless ecological extraction. And you put them together, you get a multidisciplinary diagnosis that is profoundly troubling.
It's a complete picture.
We are building an architecture of control. If we look to the past to understand the present, we can draw on the theories of the philosopher Hannah Arendt.
This is a crucial framework.
In her analysis of the material and economic preconditions that lead to fascism and totalitarianism, she identified a specific structural homology.
Let me explain that concept, as Arndt's analysis is key here. A structural homology means that the underlying architecture of two seemingly different systems is actually identical.
Right.
In her historical study of totalitarian structures, Arndt noted that they do not arise out of nowhere. They historically emerge from the specific convergence of two economic factors. First, you have massive amounts of surplus capital.
Wealth concentrated at the top.
Yes, wealth that desperately needs a new, unregulated investment frontier to maintain its high rate of return. Second, you have a massive surplus population.
Meaning a demographic of workers that the traditional labor market has displaced and can no longer absorb.
When I apply that framework to our current situation, the parallels are exact.
Artificial intelligence acts as the ultimate unregulated investment frontier for those massive accumulations of surplus capital. Trillions of dollars are flowing into the tech sector because it promises exponential, unprecedented returns.
But simultaneously, the deployment of that very technology displaces human labor.
It actively creates that surplus population of precarious, non-college educated workers and marginalized gig workers.
And this is where the self-reinforcing loop of control closes. The artificial intelligence sector absorbs the surplus capital, displaces the workforce, and then simultaneously provides the precise tools.
The autonomous military drones, the predictive policing algorithms, the global digital Panopticon.
Exactly. It provides the tools that the state requires to surveil, manage, and suppress the marginalized populations displaced by the technology. It is a perfect closed-loop system of power.
To maintain the momentum of this system and prevent the public from intervening, the architects of this technology rely heavily on a psychological tactic.
The false urgency.
We can call it the false urgency of tech discourse. I was reading research coming out of the London School of Economics, and they highlight a recurring temporal theme in how tech executives and investors talk about AI.
They love talking about timelines.
They constantly dictate the timeline. They claim that we are on a rapidly accelerating, absolutely inevitable, and historically unprecedented trajectory. You constantly hear bold declarations from tech leaders that artificial general intelligence, or AGI, will be achieved in 2 to 5 years.
I argue that this narrative of extreme, unprecedented urgency is not based on proven scientific fact. It is a deliberate, highly effective political tactic.
Engineered to create a state of permanent panic.
Yes. The goal is to force rapid deregulation and to bypass the slow, methodical, deliberative processes of democratic decision-making.
If they can convince you and convince global policymakers that there is simply no time to think, no time to debate the ethics, and no time to implement new social safety nets, then they force society into a corner.
They make it seem as though the only viable option is to step aside and let the tech giants unilaterally solve the problem that they themselves are creating.
It is a mechanism for creating an illusion of technological certainty in a scientific field where actual outcomes remain highly unpredictable. By monopolizing the timeline, they restrict democratic action and permanently empower a technocratic elite to make decisions on behalf of the global population.
This brings us to the most crucial part of our deep dive. How do we reclaim power?
Yes, because if the anxiety you feel is a symptom of a systemic crisis, then the interventions we demand must be systemic as well. We cannot settle for minor algorithmic tweaks.
Minor tweaks won't cut it.
Asking a tech company to make an autonomous weapon slightly less biased or asking them to voluntarily self-regulate their water usage is completely inadequate. We have to focus on massive, structural solutions that alter the balance of power.
I maintain that the primary structural intervention must address the fundamental vulnerability of human labor. We must comprehensively detach the concept of social survival from traditional employment.
Decouple it entirely.
As long as your ability to afford housing, healthcare, and food is tied to a job that can be optimized out of existence by a logistics suite, you are completely vulnerable to algorithmic displacement. The implementation of a universal basic income, combined with truly portable benefits that follow the citizen rather than the job, is not a utopian luxury. It is a structural necessity.
It gives people leverage.
Exactly. It provides workers with the baseline economic leverage required to refuse coercive, precarious labor. It grants you the socioeconomic independence necessary to actually have bargaining power against the machine.
And when we look at the physical and ecological infrastructure, we need equally aggressive shifts in policy. We need strict, enforceable carbon pricing that forces these trillion-dollar corporations to internalize the true environmental cost of their data centers, rather than outsourcing the destruction of water tables to local communities.
We have to stop letting them socialize the cost while privatizing the profits.
We must seriously discuss the public ownership, or at the absolute minimum, the strict utility-style federal regulation of foundational AI infrastructure. This computing power has become essential to modern society, and it is far too powerful to be governed solely by the mandates of shareholder value and corporate profit.
And geopolitically.
Furthermore, on the international stage, we need enforceable treaties with aggressive, independent verification mechanisms to unequivocally ban lethal autonomous weapon systems before the speed of flash wars triggers a global catastrophe.
Synthesizing everything we have covered today, the core revelation is this. The pervasive anxiety you feel surrounding artificial intelligence is entirely rational.
It's completely justified.
However, it is routinely and deliberately misdirected. When you feel a sense of dread about the encroaching machine, what you are actually recognizing is a vast, historically entrenched, interconnected system of wealth concentration, unaccountable state and corporate power, and relentless ecological destruction.
That's the real machine.
The dread does not come from the science fiction fear that a chatbot will spontaneously achieve sentience and turn malevolent. The dread comes from the stark, material realization that our democratic institutions, as they are currently structured and functioning, are simply not equipped to protect you from the very real humans who are building, funding, and deploying these systems.
The ultimate battle of the 21st century will not be fought between humanity and artificial sentience. It will be fought between the populations who inhabit the physical Earth and the isolated architects who seek to govern it through the cold perfection of algorithms. Recognizing the true nature of this machine is the only way to dismantle the architecture of its control.